Hello, everyone. Hello, Antonia.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have one of our authors from us here in Madrid for the promotion of the Raymond Scholar, your book and your first book published in Spanish.
Yes.
And how has been this trip to Spain?
Well, it's been amazing. So I arrived yesterday and was taken immediately to a fantastic event with conversation and everyone had dressed up as well. So it was a bit like in the book itself. There's an opening ceremony and everyone dresses up. It's in a big kind of palace and everyone's very glamorous, and it felt a bit like that. So so that was my first introduction to Madrid.
Yes.
I assume everyone always dresses very glamorously,
Yeah.
with feathers and ball gowns and masks.
Yeah, and you also told us that this was your first time going outside of the UK for a tour of your book. So, for Spanish readers, could you introduce yourself? Who are you? What you have been writing for the past few years, and why did you decide to write the Raymond Scholar?
Yes, so I've been writing for about 10 or 12 years. My first series was a historical crime series, and that wasn't published in Spanish. So The Raven Scholar is my first book in the Spanish language, which I'm very excited and proud about. So the Raven Scholar itself is obviously epic fantasy. And it was what I've always wanted to write. So as I was growing up, that was my first love. That was the genre I read both, as a child and growing up. And I just was never sure whether I would get the opportunity to write in this genre. Partly because it was my own sense of I needed to get to a point where I was confident enough to write a book that was so big in all senses,
Yes.
that's so expansive, that I create a world. So I started writing it in 2020.
Yes, during the pandemic.
During the pandemic,
Yeah.
yes. So then I became completely immersed in that world, as we do as fantasy writers, I think, and it's what I was looking forward to doing. Shall I talk a little bit about what the book is about?
Yeah, a little bit, and maybe how did you came up with the idea for the book, and how did it ended up being?
So I'd come to a bit of a crossroads with my writing. I'd written this historical crime series, and which I loved writing, but before that I'd written a kind of gothic novel that didn't work at all, but
About vampires, right?
It was about vampires, yeah. And so I tried that, and it had gotten away from me. It got too big, and so I was a bit intimidated in a way to sort of go back into the genre, but I finally, as I say, I finally took the courage, and I'd come to this crossroads. I'd finished my historical crime series, and I knew I wanted to write epic fantasy, and I knew I wanted to bring mystery into it because I really enjoy writing murder mysteries as well.
And it's your signature, I guess, for this many years.
Yeah, it's something that I really enjoy, and so that was as much as I knew. But I'd also, come to the point where I thought, I just need to take a break. And I think sometimes creatively, you need to just stop and try not to force anything. And I really felt that I'd got to this point. I just need to go away and read books on subjects that I'm interested in, and enjoy the summer. It was the summer, and just go into the library. And I went to the British Library, which has got pretty much every book you could ask for. Call anything up I was interested in, and quite a lot of that was about animal symbolism and folk tales as well. And that was where the sort of germ of the story came from, I think.
And could you explain us, like, how did you use this animal symbolism in the book, and how each animal works, and what is like the personality traits of each god?
So the idea of the book is that many millennia ago there was an environmental catastrophe that almost destroyed the whole world. You can see on the map, which is very beautifully done in this book, that surrounding the empire of Oran, everything is scarred, and there's an empty sea and a poisoned forest. So it's almost as though this environmental catastrophe has sort of come to this point and just they just survived as the human race just survived, but because that happened like many millennia ago, the idea is that when it first happened, they would obviously want to remember and for this never to happen again.
Yes.
Okay, so I thought, well, they might, for instance, have this sort of religion where individual animals would become the guardians of the land that has survived. So you have these 8 guardians, and they all come to represent different aspects of both individual personalities of people, but also of how you actually hold a society together. Yeah. So whether it's the law or whether it's artists and so on. And so the point where the Raven scholar starts, though, of course, because it's millennia further on, that environmental catastrophe is long forgotten. They only have echoes of memories of that. So the thing that they've kind of created to help them remember is quite distant. So it's at that point, the story starts at that point of a civilization that has maybe forgotten, the danger.
Yes.
So that was the starting point. But in terms of the guardians themselves, I could go through each one, but
maybe you're like the most signature.
I think maybe we should start with the Raven.
With the Raven,
would make sense, wouldn't it?
Gives the name for the book.
Yes. So the way I would think it through is I would think about the way that the animal actually behaves in the wild, and also and read up on that, their behaviours, but they're also then their myth, because I tried to choose the 8 animals that were quite universal in many ways, that had many different myths attached to them.
Yeah.
Because I'm very interested in how, as humans, we create myth about animals, because it is so much about our observation. Because obviously our ancestors lived out in the wild, and so we observed how foxes behaved. We observed that they're clever, and that they operate on the boundaries between the domestic and the wild as well. And so when our ancestors saw that, then they start to create metaphors, and because we like to anthropomorphize. So ravens, for instance, are very clever. They're very quick. They're always the first to be at any kind of scavenger, kind of event, and so because of these various behavioural traits they have, that then creates a myth. So it's like people think, they can see the future. Ravens can, because they're so quick. How did they know, that this is going to happen?
Yeah.
Of course, they're just very astute, so they're very, they're very alert.
Yeah.
So I worked from that, and I thought, okay, well, what kind, what would that relate to in human society? And of course, that would be, the kind of the scholars and the people that who are the historians as well. People who are looking back and forward.
Yeah. So you also have. So you mix that part of high fantasy, but also with kind of the academia setting, or historical academia setting.
To some extent, yeah. I think I've done a couple of talks now about that involve dark academia, and the novel has some elements of that, but really it's almost off the page, because my main character Nima has been in a monastery in which she learned all of her kind of scholarly ways, but you only catch that in glimpses. It's more you see that her as a product of that, and how she then moves on. So it's not set in the monastery itself.
Yeah. And another element that you use for the book is like a mortal competition that could remind us of like the Hunger Games, but not really. I think it's how is it different from Hunger Games, because when we think about a competition, we just think about that, but this is a competition for the throne. So explain us a little bit about what is it about.
Yes, so the idea is again that that there's a sort of long back history, but we're at this point, and the way it happens now is that any emperor or empress can only rule for up to 24 years. That's the limit, and after that they have to abdicate. And if they don't, then it's believed that the 8 guardians will come out from the hidden realm, which is where they exist, and will come and destroy the world. So it's like, that would be a bad thing. So
it's serious.
So you do need to abdicate. Yeah. So at the beginning of the book, you have Emperor Burson, who's been on the throne for 24 years, and so that triggers a series of trials. And what happens is so each of the guardians has a monastery attached to it. Yeah. So the Raven Monastery, Fox, Tiger, etc. And they each select a contender to go to the Imperial Island to compete for the throne. So there's seven of the monasteries do this, and then the 8th monastery, which is the Dragon Monastery, they're very separate, and they don't want to be, they desire not the throne, as they say. Yeah. So they send a proxy to fight, to just as to be part of the process. Yeah. But they do that on the understanding that they remain completely independent. So then each of the trials is set by the different monasteries. So you have 7 trials, or 8 if there's a tie. Yeah. Which would be the dragon trial. So yes, so that's how it works. And it's a series of trials and then also fights. And I should say, as I always like to say, this is not my suggestion of how we should run things. I don't think it would be I don't think that would be a good way to.
Violence is not the answer.
Yeah, but none of it would make for a fair or equitable society. That's part of the point, so the story.
And which animal house do you identify the most with?
To some extent, Raven, because they're the scholars, and they also love their research. And the another thing about ravens is they love to cache. Whenever they have a kind of extra food, they cache food. So I like this idea that for scholars it's like caching knowledge, so I think probably most likely a raven, but I think temperamentally I'm probably more of a fox, because foxes are they don't like to be pinned down, and they like to have lots of options open, and so I think that's probably.
So you're a mix of both
perhaps.
of them.
But to some extent, I think I'm probably a mix of all of them. But there's always one that will come to the fore.
And how, in this fantasy world, how did you introduce the murder mystery element?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was writing it, I thought, why did I do this? Because I suddenly realised why there weren't that many epic fantasies that also have there are some, but you think this is really difficult, because when you have epic fantasy, obviously, and you've got the trials going on, there's a lot of action and character, and then if you introduce murder mystery as well, you have to make sure that the tension remains and the balance, but it's integrated. It's for so the murder is very much integrated into the trials, and it happens on the eve of what they call the festival, which is this big competition, and it involves one of the contenders. So so once you have that, it's actually the mystery is very much integrated into the trials and what's going on. The conspiracies underneath. Yeah. So it isn't like, there's also a mystery. There's also a mystery to solve in the middle. It's all part of the same story. So that's. So
it's a key element that explains.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. I think. I wouldn't have put it in just to say, because I do love murder mysteries, but it would just sit on the top otherwise. So yeah.
So do you think that this book could also be appealing to like murder mystery readers, even though it has like the heavy like fantasy world building?
I think some. I mean, some people just are stubborn about fantasy, aren't they? And I don't really understand it because I love it so much, and I don't understand because some genres,
are like not underrated, but maybe like not like considered like not as much quality, but it doesn't make sense.
I wonder I mean, you'd have to ask someone who doesn't read them, but
exactly.
But I wonder sometimes whether people feel I'm intimidated, or I don't quite know where to start, or something like that.
Or like a big series, because in fantasy there's a lot of like big series.
or they would, in any case, I think there will always be people like that who just I can't read a book with magic in it, for instance. But actually, I think when particularly with historical crime, there are lots of parallels, because with historical crime you have to create a world that people can step into and feel convincing that they've never experienced. And then once you start thinking about that, you think, well, that's true of all literature. All literature has to create a world, a fictional world. Whether it's contemporary or that you're bringing the reader into and saying, this is how I've created it for you to walk in.
Exactly.
So I think once you get over that, and people go, oh, actually, this is just another world to step into, and it has rules.
Exactly.
It's not just suddenly going to pop up and someone's going to zap you with magic. It has very clear, systems. Then hopefully it would be for anyone.
Exactly. So for both like fantasy readers and murder mystery readers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, with the murder in the book, I wanted to make sure that if you took it out, and put it into a contemporary or historical crime, it would still
make sense.
Absolutely, So there's it's not suddenly like, I've
convenient or like made for this story to work.
It's a fully functioning murder mystery within it.
On its own. Yeah, and I also wanted to ask you, like, could you tell us a little bit about Nima, the main character, and also like who is your favorite character, or maybe the one that you identified yourself most with?
So Nima is the Raven scholar of the book, and she's come from. So within this world, it's very much structured by class. So you have the venerants, who are the very very wealthy, often long-standing families who've held a lot of power for a long time, and then you have the kind of middling families and the gradations of it. So high, middling, and middling, and then you have the commoners and Nima is a commoner, but also from a place called Scartown, which is particularly kind of notorious in a way for being quite. It's right on the edge of the empire, and it's not a place where that anyone from high venerant family would want to kind of be part of. So it's So Nima's seen very much as this kind of not outsider, but certainly within the imperial court she would be, and in her case, the way that she's tried to move through the world is through her intellect, and she's very very bright and very studious, and huge reader. And so she gets the scholarship to the Raven Monastery when she's 14, and so she heads off there and becomes the best scholar of her kind of period. So she keeps. She's also deeply unpopular, it has to be said, but partly because of that,
Exactly.
But she struggles to connect with people,
to fit in,
and she always had, and part of her sort of sorrow about going to the Raven Monastery is that she always thought, when I get there, then I'll be, surrounded by people a bit like me, and I'll finally sort of connect. But in fact, it doesn't work out that way for her. So at the beginning of the novel, however, she has manage to get a very low tier role within the imperial palace, and absolutely no power, no kind of no respect, nothing. But she has her little room where she does her work that nobody reads. But then she's suddenly given an opportunity at the beginning of the book that could elevate her much higher, but it requires her to make a dubious moral choice, shall we say?
Yeah.
And the choice that she makes then has a huge impact on the rest of, what happens to her over the course of the novel.
Yeah. And
it's very difficult to talk without giving spoilers.
Exactly.
So.
Because I think this is like the main part that will define the rest of the book itself. Yeah. And talking about morals, and we have also talked about this, but like morally great characters, like we said that it's not like black or white, like we all have different kinds of like things inside of ourselves. So you wanted to like show that your characters can also be human. What would it mean, like bad or good?
Yeah, I think I always start from what their backstories are, what their history is. Before I even plot the book out, I've got the characters that I start to play around with and think about. So it's by drawing out their character, that then informs the story, along with the map as well is quite important. So there's this, once you start drawing, because once I'd drawn the map, and it does sort of create plot in a way, because like I was saying about Scartown, where Nima came from, once you draw that town and you see it's on the border, and I think, well, what's going on there, and what would it be like to live there, as opposed to, in this kind of very cultural hub down, down in Arbel City, it's called, so each of the characters, you start to think, well, where are they from? What's their background? What's their history? What's happened to them? How have they got here? How have they got to this point? And that informs the story. And so once you have those back histories, then inevitably they're not going to be, one thing or another. They're not going to be pure good or pure bad. And even when they do terrible things, I always want to try and kind of at least explain why. Because that really interests me. Is like how, when someone makes a decision, or does something perhaps that is out of character, or that would make sense to no one else. But I like the idea of like, this may be why. So there's a character, Ruko, who becomes quite important throughout. But again, a bit like Nima, he does something at the beginning. So he and Nima are kind of, there's a parallel story in a way, in the early part, and Ruko does something that seems like completely outrageous.
Yeah.
But I hope even with him, you as you see, like, just some of the things that you hear about his childhood and his experiences might at least kind of explain, and also give a sense of where he might be going next. Yeah. Spoilers.
And until there, we can say. And which one was like the most complicated character to write about, or like to make his personality clear?
I think I really enjoyed writing all of the characters. Funnily enough, even the ones that are very, So there's a character. I think you pronounce it. I would say Vabras, but you might pronounce it differently in Spanish.
Kind of the same.
Yeah. Okay. And he's very blank for a lot of the novel, but I quite like that. Then that meant that ever so often he would just emerge, and that was always quite fun to write. You go, oh, everyone's forgotten, everyone's forgotten about Vabras, and I like that kind of character as well, who, just hides in the shadows, but isn't even hiding. Actually, not even hiding in the shadows. He's just camouflaged in his blandness. So that's kind of, So even that's a very different character from someone like Cain, who's incredibly flamboyant. Yes. And
Cain for us.
Oh, okay, good. That one is it. Okay. And he's so much fun to write, because he's always testing and pushing buttons, and always doing the opposite of what he should be doing, and that's great fun to write too. But I like the mix. I really enjoy that, and I think you get that with epic fantasy as well. You get that chance to follow lots of different characters, so it's fun.
Yeah. And I'm also curious to know about how is your like writing routine every single day, or does it change has it changed through the years?
Yeah. This is where your question about are you a fox or I'm quite a fox about writing.
Okay.
Writing. I had to do a podcast a while ago called something like how you write, and he kept asking me questions about so what time do you get up in the morning and where do you work and describe it. I'm like, well, sometimes I get up this time and sometimes I get up that time and sometimes I work over here and sometimes I work over there.
Yeah.
I do have a process. I do sort of work I get up every day and I do work, but obviously, but I do move around. I do move around. I don't like to sit in one place for too long.
So it's not always fixed.
Yeah, and I sometimes like to go to a cafe and work there. I think it's good for me.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but for me, I like getting out and sort of being in a different environment. It works for me.
Yeah.
It sort of triggers something.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask you, because you're currently writing the second book, and how has the process, how was it different from writing the first one, and how easy or hard it has been?
It's a good question, because I wasn't sure when I finished the first one. I thought, oh, okay, so I've got most of the characters. I know all of them, so I didn't have to do that. And I know the world. I've developed all of that, and I've set them up in the end of book one. So this should be more straightforward in some ways, but it's not really, because you're still actually exploring. Once you get in, you're still doing the same kind of work, because you're just taking the characters deeper and into new experiences. So again, even the way I always plot everything out, I always have like the basic beats of a story, but then once I get going, the individual scenes can shift quite a lot in terms of how I kind of then present how things happen. Sorry, that sounds vague, but so it's just all of that kind of work about, okay, this character's now here. How are they going to react, and how am I going to express that? That takes the same amount of time, basically. So it's actually much more similar in terms of the process than I thought.
Yeah, and you also told us that you didn't expect like the editors to accept that this was gonna be a trilogy. You just thought that maybe they would only want the first book to try it out.
Well, I always saw it as a trilogy, and it only ever made sense to me in that way. But it felt very presumptuous to go to my publishers and say, "Hey, I've never published any fantasy before. How about you buy 3 books from me?" So I just did an outline and some sample chapters and my version of that map, and and stuff about the Guardians and everything. And I just said, look, this is what I'd like to write, and it is a trilogy. But they take if you like it, then great. But I had no sense of whether they would go for it, because it's it was very different, and they were taking a chance with me. So, but I don't think I could have written it as what it just wouldn't have. For me, it was always a trilogy. Yeah. But I would have. I guess I would have done something else. But I'd have been heartbroken. So I was very lucky, because I really wanted to write it. But it did feel like it had to be an epic. It had to be epic.
Yeah. And do you think it's easier to write like a trilogy or like a standalone? Because sometimes people say that, like standalone should be easier, but it's not, because you have to put everything and make it make it make sense in one book, rather than having like a full trilogy for you to work on it.
I imagine that would be hard. And even with my previous series, because it had one main protagonist, I liked the way it developed over the 4 books, and he changed and grew up. Basically, he was in his 20s in the first book, and he really kind of he changed through the experiences that happened in the book. So
Yeah.
like you finish book one and you go, okay, well, he's been through these terrible experiences and that's going to affect him.
Yeah.
So I like that sense of having enough of a series that you can follow
Yes.
characters, and that's certainly true of the Raven Scholar. I mean, Nima in book one is going to be different, inevitably quite different.
Yeah.
By the time we get to the end of the next book
Yes.
two and so on.
Yeah.
So, and I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. But it is I guess a luxury in a way to
Yeah.
be given that opportunity to do that. I've never written a standalone in that sense. I mean, my very first book could read as a standalone.
Yeah.
But
but I think that for us, like fantasy lovers, I think that trilogy or a bigger series is always like the.
And also, then you've got the world. You think like I've created this world, and there's so many different stories I could tell within it as well. So even having finished that trilogy,
prequel series or like spin-off. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, you've got I don't know, but because I'm so sort of immersed in this one, who knows what I'd do next? But it's certainly I love the fact that it's there, that world is now there that I can explore.
So it never ends. Like you have so many possibilities inside of this world. And how has been like the reception of the public, like in the UK mainly, because there has been a huge success. It has been translated into many languages already, now into Spanish. And how has been like the readers like feeling about the book and getting to know you? Maybe readers that didn't know about you because they didn't read historical crime, but they do read fantasy.
Well, and I'm not on social media, so I don't get to see all of the reactions. But just from events that I've attended, I found that the fantasy community is so welcoming and so enthusiastic about not just reading generally. Like everyone's always kind of sharing great books they've just read, and so I'm getting lots of kind of reading tips for myself.
Yeah.
But I've just found it a really positive experience from that point of view. And the reception, it does seem to be good. I'm not trying to be false modest, but it's done well. It's certainly the most successful book that I've written so far by a long way. Which is as I said, it was always a passion of mine growing up. I always loved to fall into a book and feel really immersed, and that's what I wanted to write. And so it does. It's very meaningful to me.
It's like a full circle for you.
Yeah, very much so. I really did put all my heart and soul into it. So yeah.
And where do you find normally like inspiration from for like maybe like you have been reading like fantasy books or like fantasy like film series or like maybe for like mundane things or like routine things, like small things that.
I think the more I look back on the Raven Scholar, the more I see so many influences, just in little things, and I think I just allowed that a bit more. I think, funny enough, that going back to that point I made about going to the British Library, I think I just said to myself, just open yourself up to what you love. And I think that kind of clicked somewhere in my brain, because now I look back, I think, oh yeah, there's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was such a huge influence to me as a kid, and some of the humour in there, and then the footnotes and things, and then sometimes I'll be watching something like, oh yeah, like I think I was talking to you earlier about the martial arts movie, the 36th Chamber of Shaolin, and that has all these sort of these tests that they have to go through that have deeper meanings than that appears at first, and it's like, oh yeah. And also I practiced Tai Chi and also Chinese calligraphy, so some of that came through. So there's all these things that in my life that has small influence some way or another in the book, and I think I just opened myself up to a bit more than I have.
Yeah, and also if people will ask you like, oh, like your book is for fans of, what would you say, like for fans of?
I think you're the publisher. You're I honestly, I don't. What would you say? I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of hard because I think like I have high fantasy lovers. I think, but also at the same time, I'm like a competition. Like some people say, maybe like Game of Thrones, even just because of the setting and maybe the houses. I think,
Yes,
but also
yeah.
you think Harry Potter because of the symbolism, but at the same time, no, because it's not as academic. We can say.
I think the Game of Thrones makes sense a little because I'm a huge fan of both the books and I did obsessively watch the TV, so I'm sure that definitely that definitely had I think it probably did for everyone who loves fantasy. Didn't
exactly.
It? Just again with in his case with the way that he's prepared to have characters who change and develop over the course of a long series as well,
and you cannot like love a character so much because you don't know what could happen to them.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Also,
that's true. Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's the interesting part about fantasy, that you can play with these characters, and it's not everything always like chronological and like, oh, it's gonna happen like this, and you know what's gonna happen. No, it's like unpredictable. I think in a way. So it makes it more interesting.
I think also if you're going to introduce a series of Trials for the Throne, it's got to feel some kind of peril. I mean, because the characters, you have to be prepared to say that none of these characters are safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, it's a different. I don't know. Maybe that would be nice. Maybe there's a cozy version. Maybe I should write a cozy version.
Cozy fantasy.
Everybody,
nobody dies.
Everybody wins. Everybody
exactly.
just like
there's no
together.
violence. Everything is cozy.
That sounds quite nice, actually.
But I mean, I think
the times we're living in.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this is high fantasy. We can expect violence. We can expect death. We can expect action-packed scenes.
Yes.
So, I think that's
and
one
ravens.
of the ravens. Yes, and I think you did a great job with it, and you have written a wonderful book. And I think that the Spanish readers who don't know you yet, I think they will get to know you because of this book. And we have received a lot of interest from not only from social media but from the public as well. And we hope you have a fantastic stay here in Madrid and in Barcelona, where you also have.
Yes, I'm excited to go to Barcelona.
Yes, we have many activities more. So thank you so much for being here with us. And hopefully we have the second part really soon in Spanish as well.
I better get back to work, hadn't I? As soon as I leave Barcelona.
Yes, well, next year. That's all we know. It will be next year.
Next year.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.